presidency of Gethin?
Gethin Jones. Well, I missed his first term, so I can only really tell you. No, I didn't actually. I got here just as he got here. Gethin Jones. Well, he was a Scottish nationalist, and he got elected on a left wing. He was a Welsh nationalist. Disaster. Okay, well, he was a Welsh nationalist, and he got elected on I think it was a Socialist Students' Alliance platform, which was at the time was effectively a far left grouping on campus. Since then, it has fallen into demise and more or less ceased to exist. Partly, I suppose, due to the antics of people like Gethin Jones, who they supported. Gethin, I don't remember him saying anything at a union meeting ever, except when it was to actually oppose something like going into an occupation. I remember he was a brilliant orator, quite good at doing speeches, partly because he used it only very seldom, and he managed to con the union into occupying an empty dining hall which was never used for 24 hours as part of a campaign by doing this amazing left-wing speech about how we need to fight them on the barricades, and if people are going to get arrested in fighting these cuts. This was when we went into King's Manor in the end. If people are going to get arrested into fighting these cuts, then so be it. So he conned the union into occupying this empty dining hall for 24 hours. And then when people realised what a farce it was, really he had to keep quiet at the next union meeting to avoid looking a bit of an idiot. And that was when we actually voted to go in and occupy King's Manor. Tim Edmondson. Well, he struck me as a well-meaning incompetent, basically. He used to be a good lefty till he got elected to president. I remember he used to buy Socialist Worker every week for quite a long period of time. But the thing that characterised him, as most presidents, is as soon as they get into the president's office, actually the most important thing for them is the union for its own end, preserving the bureaucracy and the committees and the finances of the union, without any sort of regard towards actually what the campaigns were about. So Gethin was quite prepared to sacrifice a lot of the campaigning power of the union. You lost my sound. Have you got it back again?
Yeah. Since when? Start Tim Edmondson.
Right, Tim Edmondson. Tim Edmondson struck me basically as a well-meaning incompetent. I think he got elected more or less by chance, because there weren't any other strong left-wing candidates. He just managed to beat a Tory who was the only other strong candidate. And once he got into office, I think he was pulled all over the place by really his position, and he was quite prepared to retreat on a whole number of issues, so that he would accept that we weren't allowed to use the union money to pay the miners to support their struggle, so that we could actually preserve the bureaucracy and the runnings of the union itself. So the union actually became more important as a sort of bureaucracy than the campaigning that it was involved in. Because of his incompetence, he basically lost a lot of issues. He used to get up and speak and not make particularly good speeches, and then lose them, so that at one stage he got no confidence. Now, the reason he got no confidence was because we passed at a union meeting of some 500 or 600 people with some miners there, a policy to support the miners' strike and to make a payment to the miners, and also I think it was to let them use the union minibuses and things like that. And he refused to implement those policies, and so he took it to an EGM where he mobilised. You've got to remember here that he was a lefty, and the only people he could mobilise in support of his position was the extreme right in the union. He used scare stories about... That's all right. He used scare stories about threats of fines and so on to get as many people as possible who hadn't been involved in politics at all up to then to come to a union meeting and thereby overturn the policy. Now, he did that, and I think he was quite chuffed by that. But at the next union meeting, he'd outraged so many people that a motion of no confidence went in on him, and it was carried by a huge majority. And him and I think and the deputy president and the treasurer were all no confidence for their appalling behaviour in that period. Now, unfortunately, they then, of course, were no longer officers of the union, but they stood again in another election, and they managed to get elected by reasonably large majorities, again relying on the most passive elements within the union, the people who really weren't prepared to get involved in campaigns and do things. That was their constituency, that was their basis of support. So there was a situation where supposedly left-wing president was relying on all the right-wing elements within the union for his basis of support, because he was wasn't prepared to take any risks.
Can you tell me, what was SWSS like in its early days? You were there at the very first meeting of SWSS in those days. What was it like in the early days? How did you sort of grow throughout the first year of SWSS existing?
Well, the main characteristic of SWSS in its early days was that it was small, and it wasn't particularly clear in terms of its politics. It tended to go over the place on a whole number of issues. But over a period of time, because we're actually part of a national organisation and have been able to learn from the sort of experiences that groups in other places of the country have had, have managed to actually develop. Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah, that's what I thought was playing.
So I'll take my coat off.
Yeah, cheers.
Right.
Sorry, I'll start last one.
Just start out with
Okay. Right. SWSS, when it started off, was extremely small. It really managed to win its first new members from the Socialist Students' Alliance, which was collapsing all over the place. So that provided a core of 3 or 4 people, and a couple more people, including myself, came to the university who were already members of the Socialist Workers' Party, which is an organisation which operates mainly outside of campus. And to start off with, we were not particularly well organised and quite weak. But over a period of time, by a number of things, first of all, holding weekly meetings where we actually talk about a wide range of politics and try and get people along to them, we've managed to convince people over quite a wide range of issues that what we've got to say is quite relevant. And also by selling Socialist Worker, and actually managed to build up a number of people who were prepared to listen to us and so on. And that, combined with applying lessons that have been learnt in other struggles, such as in the LSE occupations, and occupations in other parts of the country and other forms of campaign around the place, which we've actually learnt from other SWSS groups, we've managed to apply effectively a consistent set of tactics towards different campaigns, being active within different campaigns and trying to take them forward and make them as effective as possible. Those two elements combined have meant that over a period of time we've managed to convince quite a large people that we're actually the most effective force on campus, although actually we're quite small in terms of the total student population. And so people have joined us on that basis. With a number of people joined, really to start off with, I suppose, from the anarchist group, which in a sense is a bit surprising, but I think it was really due to the fact that there were quite a lot of people in the anarchist society who really wanted to do things but were so disorganised that nothing ever got done. So that was quite easy to convince them of the need for a party. And then a load of people in the Labour Party have joined us. Again, the two elements. On the one hand, the fact that we've been quite effective in terms of initiating and building campaigns, whereas the Labour Club has tended to stagnate over the last two years or so, I think. Combined with sort of general arguments about whether it's possible to transform the sort of society that we're living in by getting a few people elected to Parliament, or whether actually what is needed is the sort of campaigns that we see on campus on a much larger scale, involving thousands of people up and down the country in trying to transform the system, and that effectively you need to overturn the whole system and change the whole principles by which it runs. And on those two bases, we've actually managed to grow. It has to be said, against a lot of pressures pulling people in the other direction, because people first come to university, I think the idea of having a revolution isn't one which is uppermost in their minds, and it actually takes quite a lot of argument, consistent argument and persuasion for people to become convinced about that.
Brilliant. Okay?